Chaitanya, hi, it's good to have you with us. How have you
Hey,
been?
thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing very well, Chaitanya. You know, Off late, we've been having some very, very exciting conversations, right? And this is becoming very common across all of my conversations, right? But I am genuinely looking forward to this conversation, right? I think what you guys are doing at Slay, it's very interesting, right? So I am looking forward to this conversation, right? A very, very interesting conversation. And the fact that coffee has been there was a time, right, when chai was being celebrated in the country, right? And then boom came coffee, right? And all of a sudden you have many, many brands which have come up. It's something which is picked up in a beautiful way. It's one of the fastest growing categories, right, in the consumption side, right, and the D2C side of things, right? And, who would have thought, a market which was predominantly a chai market in that sense, right, will switch to coffee and, and how, right? And I think it's becoming very interesting in that sense. So I am, very excited for this conversation, Chaitanya.
Good to hear that, and I can feel the excitement.
Chaitanya, before we dive into the conversation, right? I'd love to quickly give us a background, right? You've been there, done many many things. Tell us a little more about that, and then we dive into the session on Slay.
Sure. So I think I Slay has been this is sort of sixth year into our journey. My co-founder Lakshmi, who she's also my wife. So we've been both have been at it for a while. But I'll come back to our Slay journey as you asked. But quickly, my background. I spent most of my professional career outside India. I worked in the US. I graduated from US. I did my MBA there and worked there almost for a decade, primarily in financial services and consulting. So I was with Barclays. That was the first job I had, and I was with KPMG in the financial advisory, M&A, capital markets. Primarily finance stuff.
Right.
And then from there, I moved into uh, education space, joining one of my clients, a company called Laureate Education.
Right.
So after spending almost more than a decade, we moved back to India in 2011, 2012. And that was a time when both of us were pretty keen and eager to kind of get started, do something on our own.
Right.
So our first venture actually was in education. It was an online education edtech company called Smart On Learning. So that was before the edtech craze that we see now. It was almost good 9-10 years back, right? We were trying to make young working professionals and recent college graduates to pick up career skills, life skills. So that was sort of our focus. But long story short, EdTech at that time was still not ready. So we were trying to build a consumer brand B2C, but we had a lot of B2B traction. So we sold it and moved along. But that kind of gave us a lot of learning for us to really do something that we are passionate about, which was to build a consumer brand for for India, right? I mean, that's really what we were set to do. So there came the idea of actually doing something in food and particularly in coffee. And the reasons for that were primarily we were trying to solve our own pain.
Right.
How do you kind of get a good cup of coffee that's convenient, that's affordable?
Right.
So I think having spent a little bit of time outside and try to kind of compare and contrast, we saw that there is a big opportunity that can be sort of pursued.
Right.
So that's how we started. It's almost 6 years back.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think professionally spent a good amount of time in strategy, consulting, finance. Did my education and actually worked very briefly in India as well. So I worked. My first job was actually Pillai Steel Plant, which was Steel Authority of India. So it was. I was actually 20, and it was a phenomenal experience to work for a government behemoth, right?
Right. Right.
So that was that. And just talking about Lakshmi's background, she also actually we both had the KPMG New York as sort of our common point,
Interesting.
but her profile is people, talent management,
Right.
strategy, those areas, and she started her career with Satyam Computers, Tech Mahindra, and then she used to help clients to outsource, HR outsourcing and all of those business process outsourcing. And then from there, she worked in Europe and US. Post that, she's a graduate of Cornell. She did her master's in Cornell. But yeah, we both sort of are, somewhat driven by two things: solving for a good cup of coffee and building a consumer brand that basically can make a difference in our customers' lives in a positive, meaningful way. So I think that's about it.
Brilliant. Chaitanya, while you say that, it's a beautiful story, right? To hear, about the two of you and all the work that you've done, right? It's very, very interesting, right? How they started. But before we get into the specifics of Slay, right, in terms of how you're sort of cutting the market, how you're kind of making an impact, right? I want to actually jump onto the macros, right? I want to talk more about the landscape of coffee, right? And when you look at the coffee, I mean, essentially what has happened is, while there has been Starbucks and there have been many, many brands, right, which have kind of entered India, I think, there was a huge excitement which was built around chai and the possibility of institutionalizing chai sales, right? Or tea sales, let me put it this way, right? And you had brands like Chaios, which had come up, and there were like brands like Chai Point that had come up, and many others, right, in the similar territory, right? And I think everybody was excited about the fact that there's a very large possibility of one of these conglomerates coming into India and possibly looking at an Indian brand, right? And chai was literally a very clean canvas in that sense, right? Besides packaging, we had nothing when it came to institutionalized sales of like the way coffee is done, right? To do with chai, right? What made you do coffee, right? I think what I've heard for the longest time was chai. There are multiple permutation combinations that are possible, right? And coffee, does in a certain way, right? And there are many players. It's a crowded space, right? What made you choose coffee? I mean, I understand where you're coming from, right? But you were trying to solve for a personal pain point, right? But what are some of the other dynamics around it? What's the macro?
Yeah, so I think, India, the statement you made about India being predominantly a chai drinking nation is to a large extent true, right? I think because of a lot of historical, cultural, reasons. But if you look at coffee globally, as well as in the Indian context, it has its own sort of dynamic, both obviously the whole idea of a beverage, either a chai or coffee, stems from the need of waking you up kind of a drink, right? Pick me up, wake me up kind of a drink.
Right.
So the coffee in that sense does that job slightly better, as we all know, that because of the caffeine content. So tea, I would say, is definitely a little bit more indulgent and more of a ritual kind of a thing. Having like I remember my days when I used to work in Delhi right after I moved back to India from US. Every 1 hour you have to step out for a tea break. If you don't, it just feels like awkward, right? I mean, that sort of is more of a, you drink this much only, but you kind of step out and, kind of catch up with others. So I think there are a couple of differences when it comes to tea and chai and coffee. Right. Chai definitely is a little bit more of a, everybody knows chai in the sense like people, it's very democratic. People whip up a cup of chai in different ways. They all do it. It's simple. But when it comes to coffee, it's slightly more nuanced. It's more complicated in the sense, to really get a good cup of coffee, you kind of have to put more effort than to get a good cup of chai. So I think that sort of sets a little bit of difference in terms of how consumer also use it. For example, even a branded chai, it's very difficult to pull off like more than a 30-40 rupees chai. Obviously Chaios and others are doing 80-100 rupees cup of a chai in some occasions, but I think largely 99.5% of the chai market is basically that's Bees Rupeka market, because I think the customer basically knows, hey, listen, this is something I can make it with 2 minutes effort. Why would I pay more than that, right? But whereas a coffee, because of the earlier point I was saying, it's a little bit more nuanced, more complicated, and it has sort of its own process and whatnot. That's one. The second is also the changing paradigm in terms of what young Indians are increasingly gravitated towards. So I think if you talk to the millennials or if you talk to the Gen Z, chai is no longer sort of their go-to beverage. I mean, they obviously talk about coffee, and we try to understand the reasons behind it. And as far as, I mean, it's a continuous journey, right? It's part of understanding the customer. I think there is a lot more aspiration towards coffee in the sense, obviously it's more aspirational than chai. And also there is a bit of monotony with chai that, you kind of have seen enough of chai. There is a lot of that playing into the psyche. And even if you look at, and these things also happen in cycles. For example, before Starbucks sort of changed the game for the US market in 1960s, 70s, coffee was, not like romanticized the way it's romanticized now, right? So it was a very functional drink. I mean, people used to drink all kinds of coffee, good coffee, bad coffee, shitty coffee, all of it, right? But the idea of, actually coffee is like sort of wine. There is a lot that the kind of varieties, where it comes from, what do you do with it, what kind of processing, how do you brew it, after you brew it, what do you do with it, what kind of flavors you can mix it up, how do you deliver it? It just you can sort of break it into multiple steps, and every step can throw an interesting possibility for a customer to experience it in a different way of indulging with that beverage. So I think from that sense, it just throws up a lot of opportunities for people to treat themselves. So I think that's why it's no wonder that the coffee as a commodity is the second largest traded commodity after oil, right? Because it just functional, and it's aspirational, and it's something that people get associated in terms of romanticizing with it in multiple ways. So I think that having said that, there are a few aspects of cyclicality as well. Like, for example, if you look at Asian markets, the fact that you look at that broader space, not just India, the Indonesia or even other countries, China, for example, to a large extent, China has been. I mean, China, if we think India is a chai drinking nation, China is like 10 times more than us. I mean, they just wake up. I mean, they drink it all the time. They don't drink water. They just drink green tea all the time, right? I mean, that's more of a Eastern Asian culture and ritual. And now suddenly the countries that have been, producing coffee as source of agri sources or markets that are catering to the Western world, including Europe and US. Indonesia, beautiful example. It is almost as big as India in terms of coffee production, but now there is a huge wave of coffee domestic consumption that's going on. Right? People used to just like India, for them until 5 years back, coffee means instant coffee. Now the amount of cafes, people are talking about single origin coffees, people are talking about pour over, all kinds of sophisticated things that you see in the Western world. And the same thing is happening in Indian context as well. We as a country, produce a lot of coffee, ton of coffee. In fact, Indian Robustas are some of the best in the world. We produce, almost, depending on the crop year, either the fourth or fifth largest producer in the world. But 75-80% of those coffees, which are the best coffees of that also, are always exported. Because the domestic consumption is still very, very less. So now, as a country, the question can be, hey, listen, as Indians, we don't dig coffee. What's the problem with us? Or is it, so I think it's more to do with a bit of demand side, a bit of supply side. I think, you kind of have to keep that equation kind of pushing on both sides, right? Consumers, as they get more sophisticated, more aspirational, more exposed, they kind of understand the beauty or what if coffee can do for them, and that's what happened in, say, Indonesian market or a Brazilian market, domestic consumption wise, or even China market, right? So I think again, to summarize, yes, I don't think we are talking about replacing chai with coffee, or coffee getting replaced by chai, vice versa. It's more of, I mean, for example, I personally drink at least one cup of chai every day. right? It's not just because I'm building a
Right.
coffee business. I never gave up on chai. I love my masala chai or a ginger chai.
Sure.
When I feel like having a nice kick, heavy loaded ginger chai goes really well, right?
Right.
So I think the customer is not really looking at them as exclusive, right? I mean, you have occasions where you wake up for a morning cup of coffee,
Right.
and you look forward for a afternoon cup of masala chai. Those kind of occasions always happen, and we see that in our customers as well. Having said that, I think some people maybe exclusively chai drinkers or exclusively coffee drinkers.
Right.
That I would say is outside the bell curve. But the median is actually people who drink both. And
Right.
depending on what you want, for example, you maybe a morning coffee person or somebody is a morning chai person. Those kind of behaviors exist. But I think the most exciting part I want to end on is the opportunity for Indians to actually embrace coffee with as much vigor and as much enthusiasm and as much access as chai, because chai is ubiquitous for Indians.
Right.
What we feel is coffee can be as ubiquitous and as democratic and as convenient as chai as possible. So the supply side constraints should not limit a consumer's ability to actually enjoy that beverage, and that's where we come in.
Very interesting. And Chaitanya, while you say that, right, I'm just in my mind, I'm just kind of trying to picture, the change that happened, right? And when I spoke of Chaios and when I spoke of Chai Point, right, this is essentially the 14-15 market, right? This wasn't the market, when the kind of data surge had exploded, right? When you talk of coffee, right, I think any consumption for that matter, I think influence is a very, very important factor, right? And what data has possibly done is that it's reduced the arbitrage between two markets, right? And I think when you look at Western world, when you're looking at Western content, right, when you're looking at influences, right, or you're trying to sort of map out influences, I think coffee is something which has significantly been kind of talked about, referred to. There are like conversations that are built around coffee, and I think possibly that's something which has kind of triggered the possibility of the consumption to sort of kind of explode the way it has, right? My sense is I think that's something which has played a very, very important role. With that, I think we're going to jump into the Slay, the conversation around Slay, right? Tell us a little more about it. Tell us a little more about the journey. How are you cutting the market, right? What differentiates Slay, right? I think there is a lot of work and energy that goes into, how you're creating your products, right? The differentiators that you've built, right?
Right.
And there's a massive consistency that you've sort of built in terms of, repeat usage, right? Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. So, I think just building on where I left off with my last answer. So our reason for existence is really to provide a great cup of coffee experience in the most convenient way possible.
Sure.
Because we do believe that there is a lot of unmet demand, which basically can be given if we focus on essentially the core product experience and try to give it in a ways where customers are increasingly looking outside the traditional consumption places or occasions. So what I mean by that is, the coffee wave that as a country, what we've seen, in the last 20, 25, 30 years has been primarily with cafes. There has been, I think as per our estimates, there are at least 12,000 to 13,000 espresso machine based coffee shops in the country. And that number is by no means a small number, right? I mean, for a country of our size, I personally feel we should have 10 times of that number. But but that those cafes exist now. If you look at the customer, increasingly, on their lifestyles and their behaviors. Firstly, increasingly, people want something in the most convenient way possible, in the most affordable way possible, because they're value conscious, they're looking at also not just the product but the experience, the overall experience.
Right.
So with these as sort of the guiding principles, we kind of set on the journey of Slay with telling our customers that a 5-star coffee experience in the most convenient way possible, where the coffee actually can come to you, or you can actually have the coffee on the go, or you can brew a cup of coffee at your home. But the online coffee is something that we started. That's how our journey has begun. Now, getting a hot cup of coffee, a hot beverage, it could be actually anything, right? But a hot cup of coffee travel with the parameters of, the taste, the aroma, it's not leaking. and having sort of that experience as if you just got served that cup of coffee when you order at a cafe. That sort of experience is what we've been able to do. And the work that we've done to a large extent is it didn't have any precedence. We had to do not just in India but globally. So for example, Starbucks and other big coffee chains, they just deliver it the same way they serve you inside their cafe. They haven't really pushed themselves because maybe they didn't see the market. Maybe that's not sort of their focus. I'm no means saying that they couldn't, but it wasn't their focus. And we obviously saw that as a big opportunity, at least for the customers that we're trying to reach, and build something that today, everybody, this has become sort of the gold standard. If you look at a bunch of other coffee chains, including Starbucks and others, they try to meet the Slay experience when it comes to online coffee delivery. Now, when you look at how this demand behavior has shifted, I always love to take the example of pizza, right? I mean, when we think of pizza as a category, 12, 15 years back, Indians were introduced to this cuisine, which is a global cuisine, very exciting, very addictive as well, and very convenient. People used to actually go to pizzerias and used to have it. Now, we were just looking at recent reports on the Indian pizza market, and Domino's obviously is like a 75% behemoth that owns that market share. Now, 80% of Indian pizza consumption is off the premise. That means either online delivery or takeaway. Now imagine, and it's a massive 10,000 crore market right now. Now we see the same thing, that democratization of a very convenient comfort food that kids to adults to old people, everybody likes in their own way, has become a sort of a utility when it comes to the comfort food. Now that's exactly the opportunity that we see with coffee, which is, listen, if I want to have a good cup of coffee every day, at 10 o'clock, just before I start my day, and I don't have to actually take out 30 minutes of time, spend 300 rupees and try to go to a cafe, stand in the line, how do we solve it? That's what Slay does. You can actually get a cup of coffee for 70 or 80 bucks that comes to you. It's better in terms of the product quality, because we don't spend any other costs. We don't have to spend money on real estate or all the other experiences. We just spend everything on our customer experience of what goes inside that cup and how it's delivered and what it makes them feel after they drink it. So from that standpoint, the whole idea of online coffee or on-the-go coffee, which is just grab and go. You're just on the move. You're shopping. You just want a coffee that you can hold while you're shopping, or you're just driving to your friend's place. You want to pick up a coffee while you're doing the drive. I think these are all the occasions that we feel, are not met, and where we see a huge amount of opportunity. And what does it take for us to do that? It obviously takes a lot of customer centricity. What are these occasions? Why? Who are these customers? What are they looking for? We do feel that our customers are very, very conscious, very self-aware, very sorted in the sense that they exactly know what they want. And they're also not just, looking for cheap options or anything, right? They're premium, seeking customers, right? They're coffee drinkers. So they know exactly what kind of products that they want. So how do you give premium without putting a hole in your pocket? So the whole idea of a mass premiumization of something like coffee is what we look at. It's a mass premiumization, focusing on the affordability. So that's why our repeat rates are the highest in the industry. Even if somebody drinks a Slay coffee every day, they don't spend more than 2,000 rupees a month. And for somebody who is a coffee drinker, they anyway spend, they go visit the cafe 3-4 times, they would have ended up spending anyways that money. So what you spend 3-4 times in a month visiting a cafe, we will basically get it run for the entire month. So, I think those are some of the nuances, and we do have to innovate around the product. For example, what kind of coffees our customers are looking for. By default, we put double espresso shots. And normally in cafes, they put single espresso shots. Why double espresso? Because, we want our customers to basically get more kick per cup. And I mean, we do have the option for customers to choose only one shot of espresso. I'm not saying by default we put, but by our regular option is 2 espresso shots. The coffee beans that go into our cup are the most premium. These are single origin, single estate coffees that come from dedicated farms that we source from. And even some of the blends that we do, for example, we have a blend called Slay X, which is India's strongest coffee. You know what? Because people, every third or fourth comment our customers write while they're ordering, they say, "Hey, listen, I want it to be extra strong." So we realize people want strong coffees. Maybe it's just the demography that we are serving who is looking for a bolder cup of coffee. Similarly, the way we package the coffee, we just don't sell coffee alone. I mean, we are actually selling an experience. So the whole idea of how you order, how it comes to you, how you unbox it, and while you're drinking it, there is a beautiful art that you can savor. We send stories along with the coffee. So we essentially are telling, hey, listen, this cup of coffee, right? You're going to engage with the cup of coffee for the next 10, 15 minutes. And that be a very nice time where you're treating yourself and, you kind of, gather yourself. Either it's something ahead of something important for you, or you're taking movement before your busy schedule kicks in, or after your busy schedule ended. So I think, the whole, that whole space of meeting a great coffee with an experience that kind of makes people savor it and feel that they really are energized and can go on with their daily lives is what drives us.
That is amazing. Chaitanya, what's the current state of the business, right? I've loved the entire bit that you mentioned, right? What's the current stage of the business, right? How many cities are you in? How many outlets? What's the current team strength? How many cups of coffee? I mean, unless it's a number that you don't want to talk about, right? But how many cups of coffee in a day are you serving, right? Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so we're currently in 8 cities across the country, and the Delhi NCR, Bangalore, Bombay, Hyderabad are our top markets. Other than that, we're also in Pune, Chennai. We just launched in Chandigarh, Jaipur as well. Kolkata is something we're going live actually in the next few days to next week. We have almost 150 Slay coffee bars, both cloud as well as our coffee bars, which are takeaway coffee. And we exclusively sell online for our cloud coffee, right? That means you have to go on a Swiggy or Zomato. And we still are not really pushing our own sales channels because we're in the process of establishing our brand. And we do see a beautiful opportunity of, Slay app, and people our most loyal users can come to the app, they can schedule the coffee. All of those things are sort of in the works. But right now our focus is, how do we meet more customers who are looking for a great coffee option, right? Which obviously to our partners, including Swiggy and Zomato and a bunch of other platforms. Like, in Bangalore, we sell on Dunzo. In other markets, we do sell through other such local platforms. But I think on a daily basis, we sell thousands of cups. I mean, we have thousands of orders trickling in. Every location on average does 100 orders. So it's almost like a cafe that kind of in the high street, but we kind of do it in a way that people are getting used to as the new normal behavior.
Interesting. And which is a market that you thought might work, might not work? You're tentative about it, right? Irrespective of whatever planning that we do, right? Markets have their own tendency to sort of play out in a certain form and way. Which is the market which kind of surprised you, saying that, listen, this is something that I did not expect to play out the way it did, right? It's possibly broken even. It's possibly outnumbered the possible expectations that you had, right? Possible predictions that you had. Which is that market, right? I mean, of course, down south, I think it's a very predictable market, right? Because I think down south there's a tendency.
Well, I think my answer will surprise you. Bangalore is our first market and our home market, and Bangalore is the coffee capital of the country. So with that lens, one would expect Bangalore to sort of be miles ahead of other markets. But Delhi NCR is our biggest market, and we love the kind of customer reception we have in Delhi, because I think people in general, the Delhi consumers actually, it's obviously a huge market. I mean, it's probably 2 times the second largest market in terms of the size.
Market. Yeah, absolutely.
That's one. The second is, Chennai is a very traditional and a typical, market when it comes to coffee. I mean, people when they first talk about coffee, they typically relate to South, and when you talk about South, they relate to Chennai. So coffee has a direct access to Chennai. But I think Chennai as a market, we actually still I'll be humble to say that we still haven't cracked the code for us. We are there, but I think we still need to do a bunch of work to understand the new age coffee drinker of Chennai and what it means, and how do we meet them. So I think it's also a matter of our vintage. We've been there for 6-7 months, and our footprint is also relatively smaller, and we still need to invest a little bit more in terms of our own on the ground resources. But yeah, I think Delhi being the largest is a surprise. Chennai is sort of a market that we are yet to get our heads around, is the second answer I would give to your question.
Well, I think when you talk about markets like Bangalore and Chennai, I mean, I know it's a difficult one because there is a certain legacy, there is a certain consumption appetite, there is a certain taste, flavor, expectation, right? And I think to kind of really crack that, I think is a little complicated. Wherein I think Delhi is a market which doesn't necessarily comes with a baggage, right? And I think that gives you a more open space to go out and play and experiment, right?
Sure.
Chaitanya, give me a sense, right? Who's your typical customer, right? Who is your typical customers, right? So when you sort of say look at your customer profile, what's the category which is kicking, right? Is it the 20-year-olds? Is it the between the 20 and 30-year-olds? Is it the 30 and beyond which is kicking? What's the category which is working?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question. So I'll touch upon both the demographics and the psychographics so that you understand it slightly better. So the core customer is typically anyone who is like sort of mid-40s. So that's our sort of sweet spot. People who obviously are consumers. They are essentially making these consumption choices, and they're largely independent, and they're seeking these kind of experiences, and they engage with these kind of brands that are sort of new age and whatnot. In terms of that's the demographic, right? And we do feel that it's definitely not a tier one urban phenomenon. We do see these customers in Lucknows, in Jaipurs, in Chandigarhs also. And in terms of, so for example, my hometown is Vijayawada. We are opening a sleigh in the next couple of months in Vijayawada as well. And I have lots of my friends when I was a kid who are these customers who are saying, "Boss, when are you coming to our neck of the woods?" Right? And coming to the psychographic, I think this is more important. I think even we will be flexible in terms of the demographic, because I think it's really in the current day and age for consumer brands, what matters most is the motivations, the behaviors, the aspirations more than the demographics. Right. So our customers are they're conscious, they're self-aware, they look at the world, know exactly what kind of choices they make. And they're also sort of hustlers, right? In the sense, not necessarily that they have these daily lives, and they meet that daily life with a lot of enthusiasm, optimism, and they kind of looking for experiences, products, services, brands that can fuel that sort of a lifestyle, that passion that they have for their life. So in terms of values, they're sort of they do good for themselves, but they also want to look at the broader picture of what I'm doing for the world. So they're sort of conscious in that sense. And they also, look at whether the brands that they're engaging with are authentic or not. It's not just, it's a lot of talk, and when the rubber meets the road, you get disappointed. So they're very, smart that way. And they also, have a high amount of passion for what they want to do in their lives. In the sense, they kind of are self-driven. So that's sort of segment is what we look at, and it is pretty defined. And we always talk about even in our internal discussions that's basically the slay state of mind, the slay customer's mind. And we do, and that's our customer. Our consumer is obviously somebody who is drinking all the time. I mean, the consumer can be anyone, but the customer is somebody we do feel that they carry these kind of attributes, and they keep us honest. They actually are the ones who tell us whether we're doing right or wrong, whether they're happy or not, and their feedback matters the most for us.
Interesting. Chaitanya, when it comes to sort of anything in food, right, and when it comes to delivery, right, and it comes to operating in many, many markets, right, I think, India operates at many, many levels and operates across, I mean, each region is kind of different, right? When it comes to, its preferences and its patterns of consumption, and it's a complex behavior, right, that we kind of have to deal with, right? Um, when it comes to a format where, and when it comes to say a delivery, right, when it comes to creating a consistency experience, right, it's a very, very difficult play, right? Because you have to manage like very, very many issues, right, around that delivery aspect, right?
Right.
How's the supply chain? How have you been able to crack the supply chain, right? How have you been able to ensure that the consistency and experience is same across each market that you're in, right? How do you do that, right? How have you prepared yourself for that, or how have you optimized for that over the period? What's been the learning there?
Yeah, no, I think it's actually pretty fascinating journey as far as
Right.
cracking that puzzle is concerned, right? Because
Sure.
you kind of have raised a question that is sort of a make or break for any consumer brand, especially in
Right.
the F&B space.
Right.
So I think there are a couple of aspects to this, right? One is, to the extent possible, you need to drive consistency and predictability for the customer.
Mm-hmm.
With the use of either your ingredients or your
Right.
use of processes, or how do you sort of give that experience,
Sure.
final experience, all of that. So wherever we can sort of codify that and templatize that, we've done that. So for
Right.
example, our coffees across the country, what we use are sourced and processed and dispatched to our cafes centrally,
Right.
because that essentially is a very important defining a variable for a cup of coffee is concerned.
Right.
Now, within that, what we do is, now a customer may want different varieties. For example, we play with the blends. We don't
Mm-hmm.
do too much of them. We have a 100% Arabica blend. We have a blend that is 100% Robusta blend, which I was talking about earlier about Slakes, or we have a blend called Madras Mud, which is sort of a filter coffee-ish blend. So we give that. The idea is, this is actually the fifth wave of coffee, which is, how do you give a boutique-ish personalized experience while you're operating at a very large
Right.
scale. So wherever we can define that template, we define. And also, when you receive a cup of Slay, each cup of Slay comes with the barista who brews the cup, who made that coffee,
Right.
with her picture, with his or her picture. So what we are
I see.
saying is, hey, listen, you haven't entered our cafe, but we
Right.
still want you to make sure that you engage with the barista who made that cup of coffee. And our customers love it. I mean, they say, hey, barista, Renuka did a great job. I want her to, always make my cup of coffee, right?
Right.
So, what are the touch points that we can look at, which kind of are common denominators where each and every customer makes that sort of an experience good.
Right.
Now, the second layer is what are the areas where we need to customize the experience.
Right.
So, when you go into the menu, the way we kind of give you the option, you can order a Slay cup of coffee in more
Mm-hmm.
than a few hundred ways, in terms of
Right.
choosing the base, to the kind of you want, milk versus vegan options, to light versus dark coffee, versus a flavor versus non-flavor, you want sugar versus non-sugar, all these things. So
Right.
we put the power for you to decide what kind of coffee that you want us to make and serve it to you.
Right.
So certain aspects that are common, we have to templatize, and we have to give a very predictable experience. Certain
Right.
items that are very personal, give the ultimate choice to the customer. So it's kind
Right.
of balancing that both, where the fun reality exists, and it's always a challenge. I mean, whenever we do a new change, it kind of shakes up the entire system. So we got to be very careful that a customer understands that change very well, and barista can implement that change without much of a difficulty. And this
Mm-hmm.
actually, I'm going back from one of the lessons. VG Siddhartha, the Cafe Coffee Day
Right.
founder, he used to do this. He used to say that whenever there is a change, the first question he used to ask is whether barista understands it or not, because you
Right.
can't really make a change at the
Right.
boardroom and say make it happen. So I think
Right.
a lot of these things are not unique from our own sense. We
Right.
drew from global examples, how a Domino's ensures a 30-minute delivery
Right.
to a Cafe Coffee Day, who actually has defined what it means for barista to acknowledge, to be part of any change you make
Right.
that serves the customer. But yeah, I think it's a very exciting challenge that all of us look at. And one thing is, one of the one of the things that I just want to say, and before ending it, is we live in a day where, just before we crash 11 o'clock in the night or midnight, we think of ordering an item on Amazon Prime, and the next day morning, 9 o'clock, you get the item, right?
Right.
So we live in a world where supply chain systems have evolved and they continue to
Correct.
consumer behaviors are faster, evolving faster than brands can even meet. So how do we make the supply chain work for us? So what we do is we say, if we are living in the world of Amazon Prime, where one day shipment anywhere in the country is possible, why can't we focus on freshest roasted coffee? So what we do is we don't use roasted coffees beyond 14 days from the time of roasting, because the coffee's experience is 100% related to the freshness of the roast.
Absolutely.
Typically, what you see in cafes is 6 months, 9 months, 12 months.
Right.
Now, what we told is, where is the gap? Where is a small intervention we can look at? Playing with that supply chain and try to tell. And we actually publish the date, and anytime beyond that date is over, we just discard those coffees. So that again goes back to our 5-star coffee experience. So because we don't run these beautiful cafes where customers can come and enjoy Wi-Fi and internet, what we focus on is these kind of things, right? How do we make sure the roasts are the freshest? How do we make sure the experience is awesome when something is delivered, like a hot cup of coffee? You get it delivered at 75 degrees. When you open, you see steam coming out of the cup. So that's an experience that customers love.
Very interesting. Chaitanya, when you talk of food business, right, one of the biggest challenges is to focus on bill value, right? Is to increase the bill value, right? And when you look at any business which is built around beverage, right, it has tried to layer it up with food, right, around which goes well with that beverage, right? Is there a similar pressure, right? Or you think, this is a business that requires to sort of stay true to the cause, right? Which is to go out and serve a brilliant cup of coffee, right? Eventually, it will bring in a consistency where the consumer comes back to you, right? So, and it's a difficult one, right? It's a difficult one, right?
No, I think you're asking, some inside the trade secret questions.
But no, I think I'm trying to understand your mind, right, as a founder, because it's a very, very, it's been heartening to hear you, right? The way you've looked at this market is absolutely phenomenal, right? The way you've broken it down is amazing, right? Now, and that's a very honest cause that you're working with, right? And towards. And then there is a pressure, right? That, you have to increase the bill value, right? And there comes the dichotomy, right? In terms of breaking it down. So
actually, I think more than increasing the bill value, what we realized is our customers expect it, because, we look at our ordering time slots. Obviously, you have pre-breakfast, you have breakfast, you have before lunch, you have lunch, you have post-lunch, you have dinner, you have post-dinner, you have late night, all these segments, right? Now, some of the biggest segments that we see are the meal segments. So people actually are trying to have a cup of coffee while they're having a lunch or dinner. That kind of surprised us. And when we realized that if that kind of occasion, not having anything to eat essentially will make us, the customer not order for us, because no customer wants to order a coffee from Slay and try to go and order, a burger from somewhere else, right? Which is very inconvenient. So what we realized is, we're not going to become a full-fledged food company, but what are those, typical snacks or food items that go along well, primarily catering to the snacking occasions, and kind of fill you up as well. So we do have a bunch of items, like croissants, sandwiches, muffins, brownies, and these are mostly healthy. We try to keep the stuff healthy. That basically helps the customers to, get their shot of caffeine and kind of get them moving. At the same time, some calories for them to kind of burn through next 3-4 hours before they kind of feel hungry again, right? That's one. Coming to the economics of it, yes, it definitely helps, because in the same order, if I can, pair up a food option, it's actually a win-win. Our customer loves it. We obviously can benefit from being able to increase our APC, our per ticket value. So it's actually a win-win situation. Now, industry worldwide, the number is anywhere from 30 to 40%. Cafes typically sell 40% food. We do want to keep it at the lower end, not at the higher end, because I think we just feel that increasingly being specialized. I think we don't want to do any product that we are not happy about. For example, if we don't give the best snack, just for the sake of chip cover to a customer, we should not do that, right? So I think that sort of limits our options. Like, technically we can do 20 food items, but we end up doing 6 or 7 because we do feel that these food items also have to be 5-star experience as much as our coffee. Otherwise, the food cannot drag down our coffee experience. So that kind of is a brand call we took, which kind of limits our food offering. But thanks for bringing that point that it's absolutely needed. Customers never want to have just a coffee. I think our coffee alone orders are 30-40%. The 60-70% are customers pairing a food item always.
Very interesting. That's a good one, Chaitanya. That's a good point that you highlighted, right? And I understand the pressures, right? I've had the chance of looking at a bunch of tea businesses, right? And I think the constant struggle is, and especially when you have other stakeholders, right? It's a difficult one, right? Because there are certain growth expectations, there is a certain profitability expectation. There are many such pieces that you have to sort of work around with. Chaitanya, 2020 has been a very interesting time, right? While of course, we've it's touched us in a not such a nice way at a personal level, right? And and many of us have kind of been hit with it, right? But it's been a very interesting time in the sense that it's kind of matured the market in a very different way, right? It's made the consumer a little more predictable, right? And something that I'd said right at the outset, right? It made us, the influence became very predictable, right? We got the arbitrage between, say, a market A and a market B kind of reduced massively, right? A lot of people in the urban markets were consuming a lot of international content, right? And that brought in a very different kind of a sensitivity, right? Which also became a huge opportunity for many D2C brands, right? Because there were no physical outlets, right? People weren't sort of traveling; they were locked up in a home or a certain zone. It became a massive opportunity for D2C, right? And I think D2C is something which is large for Slay as well, right? Tell us a little more about that, right? How has 2020 shaped up your business? In a sense where we're going to live in a hybrid world, right? And this is not something that's going away. This is something which is going to be here. What's your thought of that?
Yeah, no, it's definitely very I would say enabling proposition, right? I think what D2C business model does is it just gives a lot of opportunity for innovators and challengers to come and make their products and services available to customers, which was otherwise very tough or prohibitively expensive, or sometimes you just didn't even know where to get started, right? So in a way, D2C is this is again my favorite analogy. The D2C is what AWS has done for tech startups.
Right.
You could actually start up something on the tech side with $1,000 of infrastructure, which would have costed you a few $100,000 before the cloud became a utility and sort of a no-brainer. Same thing with consumer brands. The D2C business model of being able to actually, all you need to do is to have the passion to solve for something that you see as a pain point or a need in a consumer life. Come up with a prototype, test it out, and kind of put it on your own sales channel and test it out either Instagram, WhatsApp, or website. Doesn't matter. So that kind of changed the whole game. So I think we are fortunate to have a bunch of D2C startups. We're one of the investors we have is Fireside Ventures, which is one of the leading D2C investors, and there are 45 brands that are doing phenomenal work across categories, from healthcare to Ayurveda to consumer products to cosmetics to everything, right? So yeah, I think this is a new paradigm. This is before Walmart came in, I think Sears used to do the whole catalog, mail-in catalog. So that business died. and retail brick and mortar retail stores came, and brick and mortar retail stores obviously are now, I won't call them dying yet, but they're kind of buckling under the pressure with the whole e-commerce and D2C. So I think for every consumer brand, D2C as a channel is very important, because they can't just ignore it. I mean, this is where you kind of learn who is your customer. Are you doing everything that you want to do for that customer? That kind of gives you the feedback loop, and it also enables you to innovate faster. Imagine you actually trying to put a new product in the shelves of a retail store versus you trying to do it from your garage and selling it on your website. There's a huge amount of difference.
Absolutely.
So I think the consumer is going to win at the end of the day, and whenever the consumer ends, obviously the people who serve the consumer would end up winning as well.
Interesting. Chaitanya, one thing which is happening, right, is that many coffee brands have come up, right? And I'm kind of trying to understand the competitive landscape, right? And more so in a D2C environment, right? Because, like you said, right, D2C has become a mainstay, right? It's not going to be, one ancillary channel that existed, right? This is something which is fairly mainstay now, right? And I think everybody is essentially gearing up for that, right? They're creating their own delivery systems, they're creating their own, channels of distribution. They're trying to understand the consumer better. So I think there is a huge science going in it, right? No longer brands don't want to be dependent on just about 2 or 3 channels, right? Larger distribution channels that existed, right? And I'll abstain from naming some of them, but I think brands are now putting in that effort, right? And you see a lot of these brands that have come up, right? The likes of Blue Tokai and many others which have come out of the coffee space, right? Now, when you're operating in an environment which is, say, for example, virtual, right? There is no touch and feel, there is no experience that you have, right? It's basically something, a product A, product B, product C listed, right? Or it being visible, it is just so much more difficult for a consumer to go out and pick and choose, right? I mean, how do you calibrate for that? It's a fairly complex environment, right? And it just makes it more commoditized, right? Where a lot of what you're trying to do, for example, from an experience standpoint becomes difficult, right? To communicate. What's your thought around that? I mean, how are you solving for that?
Right. So I think so we do have a packaged lines of business also for Slay. We sell on Amazon, and it's actually our it's not definitely a huge focus for us because our focus is on the cafe side and trying to scale. But we do sell quite a variety of packaged coffees on Amazon, our own website, and we have a team that basically. So I'm talking from those experiences.
Right.
So firstly, when we actually sell through our own channels, even our RTD or our ready-to-drink coffees that are made by our baristas, through either our coffee bars or through our online cafes, there is still a D2C angle very much there. We do, as any sales setting where we actually deal with the customer ourselves is a D2C. It doesn't matter, what you're selling. So we do get a lot of that consumer insights. And when it comes to say, let's say Amazon or your own platform, I think it all comes down to the customer voice. I think we have to go with what customers are basically talking about your brand. So I think the crowd intelligence of a particular category product basically is the most important factor. So the customer reviews and ratings is basically the hand of God, right? I mean, that decides the brand's destiny. So how do you actually make it happen? In a crowded setting, that's exactly where brands have to innovate. So that means, are you giving something more than what customers are expecting? Am I delighting a customer more than their expectations? Or the industry average is here, I'm pushing myself always to give 2 notches above. So whatever makes a customer happy to leave a great feedback on the sales channels you're doing, either your own site or your own Amazon page. I think that has become to that, because if you look at a customer shopping journey, people no longer are going to Google, right? I mean, I want a new pair of sneakers for me to go for trekking. What I go to Amazon, search for shoes for trekking, and I look at the top, and I even turn the filter of 4.0 or higher with 100 plus ratings as my default. I mean, this is a customer behavior. So brands increasingly have to say, either are you playing your A game or you don't exist. So, it's a very cutthroat world, a cutthroat world where consumer is basically having a feast, having the time of their days, right? It's no longer, a seller's market. It's 100% buyer's market.
Right. I think I kind of agree and disagree with you. I very firmly believe, I think we've gotten to a phase where, creativity in a product is going to thrive, right? And I think that's what a consumer is going to eventually look at, right? I think, and I think this is something which is very, very it's amazing in the sense that because, many brands will actually be able to come out of that, the commoditized zone that they're operating in, right? Where the profitability is very predictable, and many other things, right? And I think people will go on to pay for those creative aspects, right? But I think that's a discussion for a different time, and we'll possibly
No,
do
but
that.
I totally agree. I think a brand being creative will reflect on a better rating by the customers.
Absolutely. And pricing also.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's another way of differentiating, right? I mean, you giving me something more than just what the average brands are offering. I think you can differentiate based on experience, better quality, better ingredients, all of those things, or better faster customer service. Like Zappos was able to build a shoe brand entirely based on post purchase customer service, right? So I think this is just opening up opportunities. There can be 10 brands in the same category, each of them actually being consumer favorite for different aspects of it.
Right.
If I'm a consumer who cares about post purchase experience, and I'm a brand who actually gives the post purchase experience more than anybody else, then I can still exist and I have a market for it.
Interesting. Chaitanya, we're towards the end of the conversation, right? I have, what are the next? Ideally, I would have loved to ask a 5-year question, but I think that's not right, and that's I think in the given circumstances that we're in, I think what are the next 2 years like, right? What's the aspiration, right? What's driving you?
I think it's pretty simple. I mean, we just want to be a brand that becomes top of the mind for our customers when it comes to coffee. So I think we want to be physically available wherever our customers are, and we want to be mentally top of the mind. That's basically our objective. So if our customer thinks of coffee, they want we want them to basically enjoy a cup of Slay, and in the process, build our business in the most sustainable way. Right. And while we do that, we also want to, create some impact, either the jobs we're creating with our baristas or the farmers we're working with. So I think it's a simple aspiration to be more meaningful to our customers, build a business, 100 crore brand in the next 2 years, and while in the process.
How many cities? How many cups of coffee per day? You can choose.
I mean, we basically, from where we are to where we want to be in the next 2 years, we will be looking at a 4x, 5x kind of a growth.
Interesting. Very interesting. Chaitanya, it was truly a pleasure to speak with you, right? I always enjoy intense conversations with founders, who are extremely clear in terms of what they want to achieve, who've dissected the market well, right? And not tangential, right? And there are far and few. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for giving us a.
I think I felt a little disappointed that you haven't tried Slay yet. Please do try and share your feedback.
I will. I saw the ad. I've come very close to Slay, and I'm gonna.
Our ad didn't work for you then.
So that's the next thing that I'm gonna do, right? And I think I'm also the fact that I have loved tea. I have loved the nuances around tea, but and given this conversation that we've had, right? I definitely want to. I mean, the first thing that I want to do is try a Slay, right? And I think you will possibly and hopefully will have a good, loyal customer of Slay, right?
Look forward to it and look forward to your feedback. It's great talking to you, and all the best with what you guys are doing. And look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Chaitanya. You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.